I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand, are you aware?
Hi, I'm Tally, and welcome back to Autism 30. On our podcast today, we are speaking with Miss Nicole Jinn, who is not only a strong advocate for people with autism, but she is also on the spectrum herself. Her history includes receiving her Bachelor of Science in Mathematical Science from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver in 2010, and her Master of Arts in Philosophy of Science from Virginia Tech in 2014. In the near future, she is looking to pursue a PhD in psychology or special education that would specialize in autism spectrum disorder amongst older adults, especially females. She is a member of Autism Society of BC and Autism Canada's ASD Advisory Committee. Currently, Nicole is involved in planning a conference for autistic adults in Vancouver in April or May 2017 that is also co-hosted by Autism Canada and Autism Society of British Columbia, which we are all looking forward to. She is also very actively advocating at the provincial level in order to make a greater impact. She wrote letters to the provincial government and had a meeting with an MLA in late March 2016, listing some specific services that will benefit adults with Asperger's and high-functioning autism, i.e., autistic adults that do not have intellectual impairment nor clinically significant language delay, and continues to give presentations to various groups and organizations educating about how ASD manifests in female adults. This is where I met her, and she gave a wonderful presentation in which she very eloquently, in a very detailed manner, explained issues that arise for adults with autism, their struggles with the current system, and why and how to advocate to improve the status quo. After hearing her speak, I was shocked to learn so much about her concerns that I wasn't aware of, and thought I should invite her here to be a guest so that I may bring to you the same information that she bestowed upon me. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
Now, why are you so passionate about helping people with autism?
Well, I do not want other adults to go through similar experiences as I went through, and decided I had to take the lead since very few adults on the autism spectrum are doing advocacy work. In other words, at one point I felt like I needed to take action because my mother and one of my brothers kept asking me about 2 years ago what I am doing about the lack of services or resources available to adults like me that do not have intellectual impairment nor clinically significant language delay. They did not say those exact words. Instead, they said something along the lines of, quote, "So what are you doing about it?" end quote. They would ask that question after I told them that there is almost nothing in BC to help adults that are diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. However, I was not always so passionate about helping people with autism from the moment I started advocating. Instead, I started pretty small and got increasingly passionate as I made more progress. First, I started talking to program coordinators in the mental health realm, and then started giving presentations on quote-unquote higher functioning autistic adults, HFA adults for short, and have done much more within this calendar year. To clarify, whenever I use the phrase HFA adults, I mean adults on the autism spectrum that do not have intellectual impairment nor clinically significant language delay. I will continue to use this phrase for consistency.
Absolutely. Now, how long have you known that you were on the spectrum?
Only 3 years. The results of my psychological assessment or evaluation were presented to me on October 24th, 2013.
Wow, you are a very academically educated person. How did autism play a part in your academic journey?
It did not play a part in my academic journey for the longest time because I got my diagnosis halfway through my master's degree when I was almost finished, and I never understood what autism or Asperger's actually is until after my academic journey ended on May 2014. I do not think that my academic journey is completely finished, as I do want to pursue a doctorate degree in the near future, and will make sure that the autism is used in more beneficial ways as I further my education.
Now, we're speaking about your education, but the fact that you only knew about your diagnosis 3 years ago, what was your childhood like?
I was treated as a normal child. I found my childhood to be extremely stressful, but it looked like everything was okay. I rarely rebelled against my parents, got along with my siblings in that we did not fight often, passed all courses in the mainstream education system, did extracurricular activities, did everything an obedient child is expected to do. My parents for the longest time attributed all of my challenges to epilepsy, if there were any. But they made sure that I was not different in any way than any other child. This upbringing is largely a product of the Asian culture, as my heritage is South Korean. My parents immigrated from South Korea to Vancouver in the early 70s, my mother's family in 1970, and my father's family in 1971. However, most professionals that work with individuals on the autism spectrum have very little to no knowledge about the Asian culture. Even though my experience is limited primarily to Korean people, there are many similarities between different countries in Asia, like Japan, China, and Singapore, to name a few. For this reason, I will describe a little bit of the Asian culture in general, which should apply to most countries. For one thing, the Asian culture is particularly not conducive to mental health issues or what we call disabilities. Then, there are two fundamental beliefs of Asian culture that I would like to bring to your attention. First is the child cannot blame the parents because parents are never wrong, implying that whatever does not go the parents' way is wrong. Second, parents only look at results, like completing high school, for example, not the process. These two beliefs are drawn from my experience and the experience of my Asian, mostly Chinese friends and their Asian friends. Putting these two beliefs together, Asian parents constantly focus on the child's disability of any kind, including autism, as a source of grief, but are extremely slow to realize that this grief is damaging for both the parents and the child, thus precluding development of an accepting and authentic relationship between them. This is exactly what is happening with my parents.
Yes, and it's interesting that you mentioned that. I know that on a prior podcast that we just had with Mr. Bo Sang Lee, he does excellent work in helping people from the Korean community over here in Canada. And what he tries to do is actually help people in the Korean community. However, unfortunately, he's doing that now. When you arrived here from Korea way back then, his organization wasn't available to families like yours, and he gives excellent insight. For those of you listening, I suggest you go back to podcast dated October 15th to hear his very wise words. He's a lovely person, and his outlook in raising his son is very different to your experience. And I really would advocate that people listen to the words that you're saying and listen to his words so that you learn to appreciate the beauty of autism in people, because individuals like yourselves are beautiful, wonderful, smart people that are valued here. Now, we're talking about your childhood. So what are your major concerns about the current system for adults on the spectrum right now?
Two major concerns come to my mind. First is the age limit, as there are no supports or resources available for adults over 30 years old that identify as being on the autism spectrum. Second is unreasonable criteria required to be eligible for services if the age limit does not apply. For example, the Ministry of Health in BC does not accept that there is a connection between mental health and autism, so the vast majority of mental health programs exclude adults that are diagnosed with autism or Asperger's.
Wow, that's amazing to know. I wasn't aware of that either. And I'm sure it comes as a shock to many of you out there listening, because my son is still a child, according to the government. So to know that these things are coming up are quite concerning. Now, what challenges have you faced that have frustrated you personally?
My biggest challenges are living with a very poorly understood, if not the most misunderstood, invisible disability, that is Asperger's or autism without intellectual impairment and without clinically significant language delays. And being female and being Asian, those are my three biggest challenges. Sometimes I wish I was nonverbal, not being able to speak at all, and having to use alternative forms of communication. I look so normal, and yet I have a lot of problems communicating with others, especially in my immediate family. And yet I am the reason why my family is so dysfunctional, at least according to them. As a speech-language pathologist I used to work with said to me, quote, "We don't expect an amputee with no legs to climb stairs independently. But most neurotypical people will not know that you have Asperger's unless you tell them, and won't understand what that means even if you do tell them," end quote. This is why I'm doing this podcast, to increase awareness and acceptance of HFA adults.
And we appreciate you being here, and I think you said that quite eloquently, and I wish the world would clearly understand what your therapist told you. I think that's very beautifully put. And why do you feel, I mean, it's obvious and we're thrilled that you are, but why do you feel being an advocate so important?
If no adults in the autism community speak up, then nothing will change. I am not talking about parents, but adults that identify as being on the autism spectrum who may or may not be parents themselves. Sitting at home and thinking about the lack of resources is not enough. Change is needed. Adults on the autism spectrum need resources or supports, as autism does not disappear after one turns 18. Creating and implementing such change requires a lot of work. Volunteering, giving one's opinion to the right places, and gathering autistic adults to form a collective voice, among other things. Yes, these changes take an extremely long time to be implemented, and it can look like our work has no effect most of the time, but not doing anything will only further delay such changes to come to fruition.
And I think that's beautifully put, because I know people that do work in the autism industry and organizations that exist are truly doing their best with what they're given, but they really need strong advocates like yourself going around and asking for change and demanding that change being done. And without people like you and other people in the province of British Columbia, we wouldn't have the facilities that we do, yet we still have so much further to go. And we need even more voices like yourself. So what would you like to tell parents with a child with autism?
For parents that are themselves not autistic, the best thing you can do as a parent is to not focus on the autism as a source of grief, as a disability or huge tragedy that must go away. Some amount of grief is natural as non-autistic parents adjust to the fact that an event in a relationship they've been looking forward to isn't going to materialize in ways they want it to happen. But this grief over an expected normal child needs to be separated from their perceptions of the child they do have. The tragedy is not that we, autistic people, are here, but that your world has no place for us to be. Instead, I urge you as a parent to look at your child's autism as a gift, because that is what it truly is.
And I couldn't agree more, and my child to me is my greatest gift. Every ounce of him, and I'm really, really pleased that you mentioned that. And what would you like to tell a child or teen with autism?
Don't let your parents dictate your life like my parents did. Instead, stand up for yourself and advocate for your needs. Your autism is a gift. Use it to your advantage and surround yourself with people that accept you for who you are, especially the autism.
Those are such wide words, and I agree. And I think Temple Grandin said it best. The world wouldn't be as technologically advanced without autism. So I think autism is a gift, and I'm really pleased that you're mentioning it here. And do you believe there's a gender balance issue, and why?
Yes, I strongly believe that there is a gender balance issue. Through my personal experience and a bit of research, I think that the source of the gender imbalance is in the way clinicians are interpreting the diagnostic criteria. Males have been given so much more attention because their symptoms are more visible or more accepted due to the differential expectations for females versus males among parents and clinicians with respect to social communication. Dr. Kevin Pelfrey, a psychologist at Yale University's world-renowned Child Study Center, said, quote, "Everything we thought was true of autism seems to only be true for boys," end quote. And this was in an article in Scientific American Mind in March of 2016, but that summarizes pretty well where we still are.
That's really interesting.
So females very much still have to prove to almost every person they meet that they do have a form of autism until the diagnostic process dramatically changes. I certainly still have to prove to almost every person I meet that I do have a form of autism, and the process of doing this is exhausting.
It must be. And it's shocking to hear that in 2016 they're only coming to that fact now. And what are the common misdiagnoses when testing a girl for autism?
Based on mostly qualitative research I've read, along with my experience, both personally and interacting with HFA females, the following 7 are the most common misdiagnoses: anorexia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, bipolar 2, borderline personality disorder or other personality disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and gender dysphoria, formerly gender identity disorder. The first 5 especially are likely to mask the underlying autism. This is not to say that there are no other sources of misdiagnosis, but those may not be as prevalent.
How does high-functioning autism manifest itself in females?
In my attempt to make concrete how HFA could manifest in females, I created a chart. The chart has 4 domains: social interaction, communication skills, restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior and interests, and other. Under social interaction, the ones I want to highlight are: tends to receive less tolerance and more expectation from others because she appears more socially adept, often perceived as just being shy. Better at mirroring others, copying, mimicking, or masking in social interactions, so may mirror many different types of personalities. And difficulty in distinguishing between friends, acquaintances, and enemies. Under communication skills, I put better linguistic abilities developmentally. Under restrictive or repetitive patterns of behavior and interests, I put restrictive interests tend to involve people or animals, which may be less recognized as related to autism. The last one I would like to highlight is emotional instability. Adult females are more prone to both temper and crying meltdowns, even in public, sometimes over seemingly small things due to sensory or emotional overload. The content of this chart is based on a combination of helpforaspergers.com, so help number 4, Asperger's, all one word, .com, and mostly qualitative research I have read, along with my experience both personally and interacting with HFA females. By explicitly stating the source, I am trying to stress how informal most of this research is due to the huge shortage of scientific research. However, a few of the traits on this chart are from a landmark study in 2015 led by Meng Chun Lai at the University of Toronto.
That's really interesting, and I'm sure you're teaching a lot of us things that I certainly wasn't aware of, and I really liked your graphic chart. Now, why is IQ so important regarding funding?
In the past, an IQ score below 70 was considered a benchmark for mental retardation, an intellectual disability characterized by significant cognitive impairments. Of course, I do not like to use the word retardation, also known as the R word, and acknowledge that it makes a lot of people angry. But funding seems to be reserved for people who have a more visible disability, and clinicians interpret the R word as a visible disability. However, IQ is not a very good measure or indicator of intelligence and should not be used to determine eligibility for funding.
And what are some of the difficulties with CLBC's PSI eligibility criteria?
Well, before I answer this question, I would like to define the term adaptive functioning to make sure everyone is on the same page. It is an extremely important term to understanding CLBC's PSI eligibility criteria. Adaptive functioning is how well a person handles common demands in life and how independent they are compared to others of a similar age and background. Having defined what adaptive functioning is, there are two main points of criticism for the PSI eligibility criteria I would like to bring to your attention. First is adaptive functioning tests or assessments have a way of excluding HFA adults, whose adaptive functioning tends to be more than 2 standard deviations below the mean, but not quite as low as 3 standard deviations. You have to be quite severe to be 3 standard deviations below the mean, which translates to the individual not being able to take care of themselves at all and requiring an aide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Having completed the adaptive behavior assessment, I am just over 2 standard deviations below the mean, so I would be eligible under the original PSI program. Besides, a caregiver or someone else close to the affected individual completes the adaptive behavior assessment and not the affected person itself who would receive the supports. So that makes a huge difference. The second point of criticism is that Douglas Lee, psychologist who conducts eligibility assessments for CLBC, said the following, quote, "The 2 areas assessed to receive PSI are not a complete picture of a person. Executive functioning has more depth than what's included in the adaptive functioning assessment." End quote. Remember that IQ and adaptive functioning are the only 2 areas assessed to receive PSI. Dr. Lee played a crucial role in developing the eligibility criteria for CLBC programs. He was on committees which established the current eligibility requirements that now apply to developmental disability, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, FASD, and pervasive developmental disorder, PDD, which includes Asperger's. We all must tell the BC government how inadequate or useless the PSI program is for HFA adults, the population I am trying to advocate for.
And I'm really happy you mentioned that. Now, I know the people at CLBC are actually doing, I'm sure they're doing their best with what they have, but it's really important. And I'm sure the people there can themselves be frustrated with their current status quo. And I really think it's important that if you too are concerned with the eligibility requirements and everything, and if you're not satisfied, to join you in your quest for better services, which I think are really important to mention.
Well, but the people at CLBC themselves cannot lobby because they are mandated under the government.
Exactly. And I think that point is brilliant one that you mentioned because of the fact that those rules do apply to them. So we need people like you who are advocating. And you answered your question so beautifully as to why is advocacy so important, and I think you're giving a clear example of why it is. Now, what is the current state of services amongst prominent autism organizations in British Columbia?
Okay, so here is what I know about the available autism-related services in this province. I met the Executive Director of ACT Autism Community Training on June 16th, 2016, and they are supportive of my efforts to advocate for HFA adults, but ACT's mandate prevents them from being able to help such adults more directly. Autism Society BC has no adult services yet in Vancouver or the Lower Mainland area in general, and the primary target audience of all their events and services still is children anywhere on the spectrum, including HFA and their families. They do have an adult support group in Prince George, but do not yet have one in Vancouver or the Lower Mainland area. And the branch coordinator for the northern part of BC in Prince George facilitates the adult support group in Prince George. I am helping Autism Society of BC to form and initiate an adult support group in Vancouver or Burnaby as I speak, so I encourage you to spread the word to generate as much interest as possible.
What is the current state of autism-related employment services in British Columbia?
There are quite a few autism-related employment services in BC that I think may be useful to HFA adults, and the number of autism-related employment services in BC is only going to increase, which is not a bad thing. However, it is worth noting that there are pretty much no autism-related services outside of employment, like life skills or social skills training, at least for HFA adults, especially those over 25. To the best of my knowledge, there are 9 autism-related employment programs or services. First is Employment Works Canada, which is run through the Pacific Autism Family Centre. This employment program launched on April 11, 2016, so only 6 months ago. Each cycle in Employment Works Canada is 12 weeks long. Second is Ready, Willing, and Able, RWA, which connects people with diverse abilities to employment opportunities. RWA has been in existence for at least 2 years, possibly more. It is a federally funded program and is being hosted in BC by the Pacific Autism Family Centre and Inclusion BC. However, it expanded or opened up to include HFA adults only as of February 2016, so 8 months ago, which is still very new. Third is BC Partners in Workforce Innovation, which started last year on June 4th, 2015. It is a recruitment pilot project to help BC employers meet current and future workforce needs and connect people with diverse abilities, including HFA, to employment opportunities, similar to RWA, but concentrating at the provincial level. Fourth is Coast Clubhouse. It's by Coast Mental Health. They do accept HFA adults. It provides pre-vocational and vocational opportunities for people with mental illness. Fifth is the YMCA Youth Beat program. It is a free employment program for youth between 15 and 29 years old who experience mental health or other barriers to obtaining or maintaining employment. It is delivered in partnership with the YMCA of Greater Vancouver and Providence Healthcare. Sixth is Gastown Vocational Services, GVS. The seventh one is Focus Professional Services. The eighth one is the Pacific Autism Family Centre has their own adult employment program called Go Group, a multi-venture social enterprise strategy which seeks to address the gap in employment equity services with a focus on providing relevant vocational skills, building, and tangible work experience. This program is the newest one out of the 9 services I know about. Last but not least, the 9th one is Spectrum Works Consulting. This service began being offered about 1 year ago in November of 2015. It is a new boutique professional consulting firm designed to support individuals on the autism spectrum with a focus on employment.
What is establishing and maintaining a strong support network?
It means connecting and surrounding oneself with people that accept you for who you are, such as friends that have gained enough trust, and people who can give you advice on managing anxiety or developing social skills. Ideally, clinicians such as psychiatrists, psychologists, or counselors would be included in one support network, as almost all of the employment services I mentioned so far want their participants to readily be able to draw from these resources in case something bad happens during the program.
And what is the Federal Accessibility Legislation Initiative?
The Federal Accessibility Legislation Initiative will result in a Canadians with Disabilities Act, CDA. It officially began in July 2016 and is scheduled to end by the end of February 2017. Essentially, Carla Qualtrough, the Minister of Sport and Persons with Disabilities, announced the launch of a national consultation process to inform the development of planned legislation that will transform how the Government of Canada addresses accessibility. Minister Qualtrough has launched a number of engagement initiatives, opportunities for all Canadians to have their say in the consultation process, either by attending an in-person engagement session or by participating in the online consultation. More information, including the online questionnaire, can be found by visiting canada.ca/accessiblecanada, that is canada.ca/ACCESSIBLE-Canada.
How do you suggest people become involved with your causes?
I can be found on Facebook and LinkedIn if you look up my name, Nicole Jinn.
And I will have all of those details on the website at autism30.com.
I upload notes or presentations on my LinkedIn profile, so you can access those if you connect with me. You can find me on meetup.com, as I am an organizer for 2 autistic meetup groups in Vancouver. I am also available to give presentations to groups or organizations about HFA in adulthood, or the differences between females and males, or about my ongoing advocacy work for HFA adults in BC. Just send me an email or give me a call. My email address is nicole.jinn@gmail.com. So that's nicole.jinn@gmail.com. And my cell phone number is 604-363-3266.
And all of those details will be on the webpage as well, and thank you for that. And is there anything that you would like to talk about that we have not yet mentioned?
No, I think we covered enough.
Brilliant. And finally, what would you like the world to know about autism?
I would like to emphasize that there is no cure for autism, nor is it productive to search for a cure. Those who want a cure for autism do not accept autism for what it truly is, and only see how it makes some things more difficult in life. I also would like the world to know that females have autism just as much as males do. It requires a broader way of looking at autism and HFA in particular.
And I want to thank you for joining us today, Nicole. I also want to remind our audience that if you would like to contact Nicole and help advocate for her causes and aid her in her quest, you can find all of the details on our webpage at autism30.com. And I also want to remind our audience that Nicole is in her late 20s, was only diagnosed recently, and not only has she come forth with being a strong advocate for the autism community, but she herself has also faced the challenges that come with being an adult with autism in our province. And we are all so grateful for the organizations that currently do work for the autism community. But I know with people like Nicole and the people in the autism community advocating for better, hopefully children like my own and the future generation that is coming up will have far more accessibility than people like Nicole and our past guests who are older, who have really set forth and the building stones to what we currently have. So I really want to thank you for being with us today, Nicole.
Thank you.
And I also want to remind you to sign up for our monthly newsletter to keep you all informed of our guests' latest news and developments and be in the know. You can also visit our webpage at autism30.com and look down at the bottom left bar and click the word subscribe. Also, if you're listening to us on iTunes, don't forget to write a review and like us and join us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and YouTube. We want to thank you, our audience, for joining us today. And once again, this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel.